Hey guys, welcome to another episode of BuildanotherBeemer. It's Nick here, and welcome to my new race car. This is a BMW E90 2005 330i. And Craig and I have been building this for not very long. We purchased it last year, but basically built this race car in effectively 2.5 weekends. So end of last year, we sent it off after we had done some basic stripping of the interior to get the roll cage done, and unfortunately had some delays, which resulted in us getting the car back effectively just 3 weekends prior to the first racing event of the year. So that meant a lot left to do. We had to try strip more of the car, get a lot of engine issues still resolved, a lot of the safety items that are required, braking system, upgrading to the different wheels, would they fit or not. We had to fit a new suspension system, coilovers, so we could have some far better stiffness in this car. So a lot of things we had to get through here. So let's take you through a couple of the items that we've done. So I want to start over here at the front, which has probably been one of the most noticeable upgrades, and that is the braking system. We've got the brakes from a BMW E90 335i here, which are bigger calipers and a bigger disc. So this is giving us some improved braking performance, and with all those bigger components, it also helps for just better heat dissipation for our circuit racing type of events. These units over here were fairly easy to source in South Africa. We found a seller on one of the local classifieds that was selling basically the entire stubs and brand new stock discs, calipers, and stock brake pads. So we basically had the whole kit, but now we had to go find some brake pads. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get from our preferred supplier. We really enjoy the PFC compound of brakes, which is available from International Race Supplies. Unfortunately, Derby did not have an off-the-shelf option for us for the 335i calipers. He did have an option where we had to use a different brake pad. We'd have to ground something, but we really didn't want to do that on a car that you want to be really sure that everything is designed for that caliper and not going to give us any issues. So we went looking, and one of the very few options were to find an international supplier. So we went looking, and FCP Euro had a very nice option on one of the better recommended brakes, which was the Hawk DTC 70s. These came well recommended with a great operating temperature range, as well as great bite and really good braking performance. So we got those through, but not without some drama. So these were supposed to arrive effectively the Friday, the weekend before, or the last weekend for building this race car prior to the international race event at Zwartkops. And unfortunately, FedEx dropped the ball there, really didn't help us out. Had a lot of delays there, had no information, and it looks like our parcel was stuck in New York and had not moved for some 7 to 10 days. Anyway, cut a long story short, we eventually received indication from FedEx that they were delivering some Wednesday or Thursday throughout that week, and it resulted in us having a confrontation with the delivery driver, because they had a customs invoice for some 10 times the value of our brake pads, which I surely wasn't going to pay in a hurry. So that resulted in me keeping the FedEx man, the FedEx delivery driver, hostage, and trying to resolve the problem with FedEx headquarters about why they'd messed up my invoicing. Anyway, we got our package, and I released the FedEx man from hostage, and we've got a great braking system on the car right now. Next big upgrade over here is our suspension system. We really, like our other car over there, we really try to get maximum value and do everything ourselves. This car is really being built on a budget right now, and as budget becomes available, we'll be able to upgrade this to better components as is necessary. But from what we found from many of our fellow racers is that we can get excellent performance from very entry-level coilover or basic systems without having to spend an absolute fortune. So we've got a set of coilovers on here. It's very difficult to see what they are, but it's a set of red coilover systems. It's a divorced rear system, but a proper coilover on the front system designed for the BMW E90. They have no adjustability, unfortunately, so we basically only have ride height adjustability, so we can set the ride height on the car, but we have no control over rebound or compression like we do in the E46. So a very basic entry-level system. We got these for an absolute steal, so these were kind of a no-brainer just to get the car out of stock suspension and into something a little bit more appropriate for the track. So suspension system done over there. I believe the name of the suspension system is Geared It. You probably won't find a lot of information online, but so far after this past weekend, and I'll give you some more details about those race heats, we've been pretty impressed for the bang for buck we got out of this suspension system. As we proceed throughout the car over here, you'll see some racing wheels, which you probably have seen on our BMW E46. These are the Koya 18-inch wheels. These are 8.5J wide, and we're running pretty wide tires on these over here. We're running 265/35. So this is a pretty wide tire for a car that isn't pushing a lot of power right now, but this is what we had, and we're trying these out at the moment. Back around here, not a lot of advancements here. We've got our tow straps over there as is required, the standard exhaust system on the car, and you can see through the glass window at the back there that we've got our green roll cage, which really does pop and do well to illustrate our theme. Yeah, we move inside. Take a look at some of the doors inside here. So Craig has cut these with his new plasma cutter, which is really great. Makes it a lot easier to work on these doors. So these have been cut out to do a little bit of weight saving inside there. Inside there, you can also see our seat. That's actually just a used seat from our BMW E46. That was being used on the passenger side just when we were doing the first kind of time trials and testing. So that's been a great donor for this race car. Same with the steering wheel over there. And we've got the stock instrument cluster running the completely stock motor. We've got our fire extinguisher in there, a gear lever, and that's essentially it. The back of there, we've probably got still some folding camping chairs just from the rest of the weekend. I haven't unloaded the car yet, and the complete stock wiring harness, which we haven't had time nor the bravery to start cutting away yet. It really is an extensive wiring harness that is going to take a lot of work to slowly and methodically remove the wires that are not necessary, and hopefully don't cut something and completely break the car's operation. If we move on to the side over here, we have moved to plastic polycarbonate windows on the side over here. So these have really turned out great. What we did here, what we didn't do on the E46, is we've removed this brace over here, and this makes this rear window have a lot longer look. It makes it look a little bit like the E92, the coupe, and it really does improve the appearance of this car. So really happy with how that turned out over there. You'll see our numbers over here. So Craig and I have new racing numbers. The E46 is number 30, my car number 31 over here, and this little letter over here indicates the class. So because it's a brand new racing car, we've entered in basically the bottom class because we have no idea where this is going to turn out. Is it going to be able to even compete in E, or will we be able to move into D one day? Just don't know. So more info on that coming up. So we've got number 31 over here, and this is the Greenhouse Smart Solar Energy BMW E90 race car. So on to some feedback from the races. Basically, we had Friday was our practice, effectively our last official practice, as well as qualifying, and Saturday were the race heats. On Thursday, we had some free practice, which afforded us a nice opportunity to try and do a shakedown on the car and find out what was going to break, what could go wrong. We wanted to get there through early, but we still had so many things to still tick off on the car, tightening up wires and getting things fitted, etc., etc. Eventually got to the track at about 12 o'clock, maybe closer to 1 o'clock, and said, great, cool, we now have a chance to put this onto the track and find out. So went out onto the track and started doing some laps, and started to get a feel for the car, and it really is, there is a very big difference in how this car behaves compared to the E46, as is expected. We know that this chassis, as BMW does, their chassis is always stiffer as they go to the newer generation, and this car certainly does that. There really doesn't feel to be a lot of compliance in the chassis, even though we do have completely stock bushes on the suspension. But it was feeling really nice and stiff, and the car was surprisingly predictable. I was expecting that the E46 would be the holy grail of balanced performance, but this car really impressed me, and gave very easy driving from coming out of that E46 into this unit here. So went out in the beginning, wasn't doing a lot of timing of the laps, really just wanted to feel the car and see how it would go. After the first couple laps, decided to go out in the second session and started taking some lap times, and it wasn't looking good. First couple laps that were indicated on our Track Addict little application indicated that I was doing somewhere in the 1 minute 20s for lap time. So this was very non-competitive lap times for any class. Basically, in the at BMW Zwartkops, in order to compete in E, you would need to be doing somewhere in the order of 117s to 116s in order to be able to compete for the win. And in order to break out from Class E to Class D, you would need to be able to do faster than a 1 minute 15 and a half. So very far away from that, and obviously a lot of work to do. One of the expectations for that, or the reasons for that time, is we know the car is still quite heavy. This car is heavy to start off with, and we haven't done a lot of weight removal like we have done in the E46. We still are running an open differential at the back, so we are getting a little bit of inside wheel slipping and not giving us drive on the outside. So a limited slip diff is certainly on the cards for later in the future. And effectively the bushes and suspension, we have a lot more advanced suspension in our E46. We've got the BC Racing decent adjustable coilovers there, not much adjustability over here, and then all of the bushes changing to either solid or polyurethane bushes just increases that car's rigidity and ability to stay flat and maintain traction and keep corner and grip throughout the track. So a lot of reasons to kind of keep the car from doing very impressive times, or at least competing with the BMW E46. Anyway, one of the chances or things that we found afterwards is I ran codes with the computer and found that our DISA units were indicating a fault on the car. And not only on one, but on both of them. So the BMW E90 330i has an N52 motor, and that N52 motor has got two manifold adjusters, which effectively changes the length of the intake manifold to promote better airflow at different speeds. So you've got a smaller one which is supposed to promote better airflow at lower RPMs, and a bigger unit which is on the top of the motor which promotes airflow at the higher RPMs. So that three-stage intake manifold really does a lot of advancement for the BMW E90, but we were getting codes that were telling us that these had an issue. So we scrambled about and tried to phone and find out, who had some spare parts for this car. We even went to the extent of robbing some of the intake DISAs from my daily BMW E60 525i. That's parked down over there. Also got an N52 motor. So we really were trying to do whatever we could on that Thursday evening to try and get some working parts into this car. We were very much hoping that we were losing out a lot of power, not having that three-stage manifold work. Coupled with the poor gearing from our open differential, it just meant that we really needed the torque available from that three-stage intake manifold. So we eventually rushed out to Goldwagen, were able to get some replacement parts, and that following morning arrived nice and early to the track and started assembling onto the intake manifold. Put our new DISAs in. We could see that the old ones, the bottom one had completely failed and seized, was completely stiff, would not move. I was able to actuate them with our testing tool, but there was no movement of the flap. On the top unit we had a complete shear of the shaft that holds the big flap inside there. We found the flap somewhere in the intake manifold, and luckily the shaft as well. The shaft had not made its way through into the intake manifold to potentially open up a valve, and then we would have a very sad time seeing a piston try to knock that valve closed. So we were lucky that no damage was caused, but replaced those DISAs and got that back into the car. The first practice session, and it was looking really fine there. Got the car to do somewhere in the order of about 115, deep 115s, and got one time out of the car at just under 115 and a half. So the car really came to just those little changes, getting to know the car, and we were able to take this 2-week built race car from Class E into Class D with that BMW E46 with very little on it. So really chuffed with that. Still a lot of improvement to make, but we got the car into Class D, or almost forced into Class D by that breakout time. at Zwartkops during the practice. So car inside Class D. We're now looking forward to race one. Just prior to race one, I had been doing my basic checks and had forgot through all of the other checks and things that we were doing throughout the weekend to check tire pressures. We know that we've been running these tire pressures on the BMW E46, and we've been doing 1.6 bar cold for so long that it's just become a bog standard. You check the tires and they're always the same pressure when they're cold, and I just did not check those. So on the right-hand side, after my small crash at Pakisa, I got the wheels fixed, and obviously getting those wheels fixed, the repair center had pumped those tires up. And what this resulted in is that the car was actually running with tire pressures of 2.6 to 2.8 bar on the right-hand side and 1.6 bar on the left-hand side. So we had a massive imbalance in tire pressures on this car. And it was just astounding that we're able to get the car at to 115s with such a tire pressure imbalance. So corrected that for the first race and was really looking forward to some better balanced driving out of the car. Had managed to put the car into, I think it was position 4 or 5 in Class D. 115.5 is still, unfortunately, at the very bottom end of Class D. So I think there was only one person in Class D behind me. So was hoping to just stay in it and not get overtaken by too many Class E cars and just see how she would last in her first race heat of the year and her debut race. So race went pretty fine for heat one. Wasn't too impressed with some of my driving strategy and tactics. Was a little bit too conservative and cautious with some of the racing throughout that heat. So eventually started going to about 116 for basic race pace, and unfortunately it resulted in no real competitiveness in Class D, and was basically fighting it out in Class E. Besides that, was very happy with it. So didn't experience any issues with overheating like we had for the entire year with the BMW E46. The cooling system in this car really is very capable. It has a much thicker radiator. It has the electric coolant pump, which is a double-edged sword. When that thing goes, it's an expensive thing to replace, and very little time to be able to see what's going wrong. The thermostat is pretty advanced and requires a lot of pipes going into the thing, and it's map heated, etc. But on the track, it's able to maintain temperature, coolant temperature, just so well. So I was really impressed with that, because that's usually a problem we fight with. Handling-wise, the car certainly doesn't have the agility yet of the BMW E46. It still feels very heavy. We have a lot of noticeable understeer into corners, and that's even with our big and grippier tires, we just can't get the car to turn in as easily as that car over there. So a lot of weight to be lost over here, and a lot more adjustment to be done on the front suspension and rear suspension of our car to get some better turn in. And that was basically the feel throughout the day. It was just kind of manage the car and just see how she does, but was really impressed because we had a finish in the car, no broken parts, no overheating, no engine damage. Only one small little hiccup that affected us. Heard a slight little noise on one of the last laps. It sounded like the fan belt, and after inspection found that the fan belt appeared to have stretched a little bit. We've got an aircon delete on this motor. Obviously don't need that in a race car, so we've deleted the aircon and we've had to go to a custom belt. We haven't managed to find a 6-groove belt. We were only able to find a 5-groove belt, hoping that was going to be fine, but it looked like that belt had stretched, and we were actually getting some hopping from the tensioner as the belt appeared to want to move between the 6 grooves on the various pulleys. So that was one of the problems we experienced. Fortunately, was able to resolve that with the help of the TuneTech team and Mish and Sean Singh. Thank you for their help, and was able to quickly fly through to one of the Midases that were nearby and get a replacement belt and get that tension sorted. Onto the second race heat, and this was probably the highlight of the day for me. So as a result of the first race and finding that or correcting that imbalance in tire pressure, I really didn't enjoy the lower tire pressure. It felt like I had a lot more rolling resistance in the car, and it felt like we were just sacrificing a lot of momentum and speed for more grip, which we couldn't really overcome with the amount of power running right now. So I decided to increase our tire pressures. We went to 2-bar cold on all the tires, which is pretty unconventional for our racing series. A lot of the guys are typically running between 1.6 and 1.8 bar cold, as far as we understand. So this was a very big change to do, and I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out. it resulted in a great experience. I was very happy with how the car performed like that. I was able to get a lot better race pace and a lot more competitiveness in that second heat. So in the second heat, because of my poor performance in the first heat, I was then forced to start at the front of Class D in the second heat, which meant I had a lot of faster cars behind me, and I had to figure out how to play defense in that second race heat. So effectively starting it there, I think I was position 17 with about a 6 to 7 car field in Class D behind me that I was hoping to keep behind at least one or two of them. Started the race, started pretty well. A couple of the turbocharged cars in Class D, unfortunately, had already got past me on the first main straight, but was able to defend pretty well throughout the first lap before a couple of the top contenders, including Craig, were able to get past me at the final corner, corner 8 at Zwartkops. From that point on, I basically was able to then start chasing one of one of our racing colleagues that had got in front of me. That was Manny in the track taxi, the E46 330i, and I had a great race just focusing on lap times, bringing the lap times down, trying to get in front of him. So I had a good number of laps, probably 4 or 5, just increasing and pace and improving lap times lap after lap, and eventually I was able to get the fastest lap ever out of this car so far, down to a 1:14.5 in race pace, and that was really impressive for that day. Really happy that we're now kind of falling away from the deep end of D and able to say, okay, with some small improvements, we're going to start competing in the middle section as opposed to just hanging on to the end of Class D. So that at the end of the race there, I really had some fun. I was chasing Manny for 3 or 4 laps, and I just couldn't make a lot of time. It looks like our lap times were identical lap after lap after lap, and I was just pushing so hard to try and get an opportunity to try and overtake. It resulted in the last lap. I was hoping to make a move in at turn 5, just wasn't close enough, and unfortunately couldn't put a dive down there. But I was pretty fast through the back end of the race section, and I was able to put in a pretty ballsy move to try and dive down into 8. Fortunately, Manny was very aware. He took a very wide line through 8. One of our racing colleagues, Mike Ramsey, saw the whole maneuver. It was complete chaos going into that corner where Manny was trying to avoid my deep dive into corner 8, and he had just got through it, and it resulted in a drag race to the final start finish line. Unfortunately, he was a little bit ahead of me and finally took the place. But it was fantastic racing, and was just so incredibly impressed with how this little time and little investment into this new race car had resulted in such a fantastic experience. It was reliable. It was just an impeccable race car for that day, considering how little we put into it over the last couple of weekends. This extends to the point where this race car hasn't got a dedicated trailer like our BMW E46 right now. So at the moment, she needs to be driven to every single racetrack, and that's what I do. So could drive her to church the next day. She's still very quiet. Was able to drive her to the racetrack, race it, put it through absolute hell, and drive her back home. So what an incredible experience. Really impressed with the car. There's some small changes we want to do. So we've got Kailami coming up very soon. Basically on Wednesday, it's Sunday today, we have to drop off the cars at Kailami ready for the Thursday practice. And there's a couple of changes we want to make. We're possibly going to be moving to 17-inch wheels just to reduce our rolling resistance from these big 18s over here. We're trying to find a set of off-the-shelf branches or exhaust headers for this car, just to limit the amount of throttling of that poor engine. From that point onwards, we'll look at a bit more on the exhaust system. We're probably going to look at putting in a BMC or K&N air filter. We've talked to the guys at TuneTech, and we're hoping to find some E90 scoops just to have a bit more of a ram air effect, helping that engine breathe a little bit more, and hopefully we can then compete a little bit better with the Class D guys at Kailami. But overall summary, what a great car. It really is in contrast to a lot of the information that we see online. A lot of the forums really warned us about choosing an E90 to be a race car. There are so many instances about guys warning about the issues, the errors, the warning codes that will prohibit this car from performing on a track, specifically in an environment like South Africa, where we've got extreme temperatures, we're running at altitude. This is a heavy car, so we're putting through huge thermal stresses through this car. The braking system has to work incredibly hard. Oil temperatures are rising incredibly high. Water temperature has to work just that much harder. And this car didn't miss a beat. it really did well. So this really is in contrast to what a lot of people are saying about the E90 and specifically the N52 motor being a viable race car. We've really experienced quite the opposite and are really impressed with this package. So we're only going to go onwards and upwards with this car, hoping to get to the point where I'll be able to repay the favor to Craig and pull some team orders to overtake him. Probably not next race, but let's see what happens in the future. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video.